You're listening to a Times Higher Education podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's campus podcast with me, Miranda Prynne.
And with me, Eliza Compton.
Well, Eliza, you have very much been in the driver's seat for this week. So perhaps you can tell us a bit about who you spoke to and why.
Well, I spoke to Sian Waring, who is the new vice-chancellor at Middlesex University in northwest London. And I reached out to her after she posted on LinkedIn about her focus on her first days as the vice-chancellor at the university. And given that a Times Higher Education report recently said that about 30 institutions in the UK are either changing their leadership or in the process of changing their leadership, it seemed like a fantastic time to reach out and talk about preparation for leadership. In her post, Sian talked about a few different things. She talked about having a mandate, identifying the key people that you should meet, and I just really wanted to know where that roadmap came from. Obviously, it comes from her experience with leadership in higher education. She's been a Deputy Vice-Chancellor and a Pro-Vice-Chancellor, but her acuity comes from other places as well.
Yeah, and it certainly is an interesting time to be taking over a university. As you say, there has been fairly well-reported mass exodus of VCs in recent months, and a lot of people would attribute that to the strain of leading through such a challenging period. So Sian is definitely striding in where others fear to tread. But, perhaps this turnover of leaders could be a very positive thing for the sector in the long term, bringing fresh ideas and new ways of working. I don't want to make light of what is an undoubted crisis in UK higher education, but often out of these very tough times come quite transformative ideas. So let's hear from Sian on becoming a university leader in 2024.
Hi, Sian, and welcome to the THE podcast.
Thanks, Eliza.
You've just joined Middlesex as the Vice-Chancellor. I think you took up the post in April, is that right?
I did, April the 22nd.
And what are your first impressions?
So it's one of those things where now I feel like I've always been here. So I've had a really warm welcome. I've been very supported by the board, obviously who appointed me, but has continued to be really helpful and supportive throughout. University colleagues and external networks and friends as well. And a lot of vice-chancellors stepped up as well just to welcome me and to offer me any support that I needed through, particularly through this early stage, but I know going onwards as well. So I've seen really exciting and innovative practices here and opportunities, lots of energy and commitment. We are going to have work on our hands to adjust to the decline in the postgraduate taught international student market, like everywhere else in the UK. And we'll be aiming to do that with clarity and respectfully, and with our focus on our core mission of education. But what I've also seen since I've been here are some obvious quick wins and opportunities, and I'm really impressed with how colleagues have swung into action very fast to take advantage of these. So I feel really hopeful about what we'll be able to do.
So I reached out to you in response to a post that you wrote on LinkedIn about how you knew what to do on the first day of the job. Where did that roadmap come from?
Yeah, so I was talking to somebody that I used to work with, and so it's a genuine question, and it was only when I was asked the question that I began to think, actually, where did that sort of sense of direction come from? So I gave a quick answer in the conversation, but I went away and I thought about it, and I thought, well, actually, I had a really strong sense of what needed doing, and it had come from a mixture of direct experience, but also observation of other people starting VC jobs. And I've also done what I'd probably say is a formal study of leadership. I've done a lot of reading. I've done courses over my career, and I've had coaching. So I've thought very explicitly about what it is that leaders do and what I need to do. And by the time I stepped into my VC job, it was really clear to me what I needed to do. But what I realised was, so one of my drivers in life is to support other leaders and help really good leaders develop. And I also want to just generally see leadership in HE be really strong and effective. So I thought if I share my thoughts, not as a blueprint, but as part of a debate about leadership, it may prompt other people to think about their priorities and what they would be doing. And for me, that's fundamental to sort of people being able to form ambitions and work towards them. But I also really wanted to demystify what it is that vice chancellors do. And to me, demystification is the fundamental mission of education. So it's, for me, it's all completely aligned with why I work in education. I want other people to understand. I want people to have choices, and that goes all the way through to career choices and, you know, what people can aspire to and how they go about doing the senior jobs that they may see as being out of their reach, but actually are perfectly achievable. You just need to know what steps you need to take.
Absolutely. And this seems to loop back a little bit to your early academic work as in linguistics and language communication. So it makes complete sense that that would be a powerful driver for you.
Yeah.
You've partially answered my next question already, which is thinking about the aspects that go into the VC role. You've been quite deliberate by the sounds of putting those credentials in place, the ones that are not necessarily as obvious as academic credentials. Did you start out with a plan, or have you seen your career evolve a bit more organically?
I thought this was a really interesting question, and on reflection, what I think it is it's a mixture of intention and instinct and luck. So I think I think I've got some qualities in me which probably pulled me in this direction. I'd say I've got a very strong drive, maybe an irrepressible drive to sort things out. And make them better. So I feel very compelled to take on challenges when I see them. I would say I'm quite a restless person with a strong sense of justice. So I think there's something I probably bring, and I knew that quite early in my career. And I think I was a lecturer in English language and linguistics at Northampton University before it was a university. And I think from my late 20s, I probably had a sense that I wanted a senior leadership position and that I was working towards it, but probably not with a very clear route plan. And I can absolutely remember thinking, how do vice chancellors get to be vice chancellors? And I know this is very superficial, they look different from me. I can remember seeing vice chancellors wandering around and they didn't look like me. And I had no idea how I would get from where I was as a lecturer in linguistics to being a VC. So one of the reasons that I really wanted to have this conversation with you, Eliza, was I really wanted to make it more transparent to people, because I thought it shouldn't be a mystery. People should be able to think, yes, if I want to do that, these are the steps I take. And then the next thing I'd say is some parts of uncovering that route were easy and some parts were really difficult. So there were points in my career where the next challenge was very clear to me and it was open, and I applied for a job and I got it, and I was like, that was straightforward. So I think probably up to being a Dean of Learning and Teaching at the University of the Arts London, the pieces just fell into place and the next step was obvious, and I took it and I met the challenge and, you know, I got the job. A big step then was moving into the more general and overarching position of, for me, it was PVC Learning and Teaching, or PVC Education. And I think one of probably the shock for me there was I was coming up against people who'd moved up. I'd been moving up as sort of a clear route through education development. But once I got to go into that PVC job, I was up against people who'd come from lots of different routes. And the challenge at that level was much greater. So I actually had a few failed attempts at moving into a PVC role, and then I started filling in what I realised were gaps in my CV. So I applied for a National Teaching Fellowship successfully, and I used that as the foundation to apply for a professorship, again successfully. But that was to answer your question, was it deliberate? There was a point at which I was very deliberate about thinking, what will it take for me to move this next step up? And then, in answer to your question about, you know, some of the governance and regulatory experience, that came with the jobs I was in. So I held two PVC roles and a deputy vice chancellor role before I came into my Middlesex job, and those roles brought that kind of work with them. So I'd say it was a mixture of being deliberate at times, sometimes just following my instincts, and sometimes being in the right place at the right time. I would also say, though, that things that turned out to be an asset when they got onto my CV didn't always feel like a gift for heaven when they arrived, a gift from heaven when they arrived, because they arrived looking like massive unsolvable problems. So the challenge of stepping up and meeting a problem translated onto something that was a great asset on my CV, but wasn't always welcome when it appeared.
Oh my goodness. Can you give us an
Can
example
I
of
give
one
an
of these
example?
times?
Yeah, I think so. When I joined London South Bank University, they had a very high proportion, an unexpectedly high proportion of student complaints, and I was given the responsibility for solving that. And we actually had our own caseworker at the time at the Office of the Independent Adjudicator, and there was it was a really interesting process of unraveling why it was happening. And actually, there were. It wasn't that things were worse than elsewhere. We actually had a route that was sending people through a complaints process that took them out very quickly to the Office of the Independent Adjudicator. So once we changed the way we supported students and we made explicit what their options were, that the numbers dropped very quickly. But there was a period of time when I was looking at this outlier statistic and thinking, what's going on here? And trying to solve it in a quite constrained resource envelope. But once it started to get better, it got better really fast. So there was a huge sense of collective achievement, I think, in the university when we saw that statistic drop from something that, as I said, put us an outlier in the sector to well within our competitor group. And it happened really quickly. But there was a moment I was looking at it thinking, I don't know what's going on here and I don't know what to do about it.
That's so interesting. Thank you very much for sharing that. Can you tell us a bit about the influences that you've had in your career?
Yeah. So again, I was thinking, so last night I went to a valedictory lecture by one of the academics who taught me on my master's course at Strathclyde, and he's coming up to retirement now. So he taught me, he's just completed a 40-year career, and he taught me 36 years ago. So I was very early in his career relative to now. I'm a VC, no longer a postgraduate taught student, and he's retiring. But it reminded me how exciting that I had found it through my undergraduate degree and my postgraduate study to be surrounded by really bright people whose brains were full of ideas. And he was exactly the same. I could remember him lecturing me when I was 21, 22, and just his energy and his enthusiasm for ideas. So I think I was really lucky early in my career to be exposed to academics and good teachers who were really important to me and really changed the way that I thought about the possibilities in the world, I think. And then something that really stands out for me is I worked with David Sweeney when I was at Royal Holloway. So David then was Director of Information Services at Royal Holloway and later became Executive Chair of Research England. So lots of people know his name. And he was extremely strategic. He was a really good and thoughtful leader and manager of people. He took people management really seriously, and he was one of the things they say when you're on leadership or management courses is you shouldn't treat everybody all the same. You should have different style to get the best out of people. You bring different management styles to different people because they respond differently. And he was really good at that. He really thought about people and what they could bring and how to get that quality, that discretionary effort. So the bit that people may choose to give or they may choose not to give. And he was really good, I think, at bringing people's discretionary effort into play. And he was also he was fun to be around. He brought a lot of personality to his job. So he was not a Mandarin or a bureaucrat. And so I think I could see how people they could do a job really well, but still be themselves. And in a very idiosyncratic way, you could bring your whole personality to work. So we learned a lot from him. And then my last example was, I mentioned London South Bank. For about 18 months, I worked with PwC on a major organisation transformation project. I really learned a lot about managing long-term complex change programs from working. They're very slick. They've got a lot of people on it. They've been highly trained, and they brought a level of analysis and kind of focus and pace that I probably hadn't worked with before. And that really changed the way I thought about major organizational change.
You've had a lot of experience with change, educational change, also technology. I did read also that when you joined Buckinghamshire New in the role of Pro Vice-Chancellor, that was a new role at the time, wasn't it? It was how did you approach that? You had come from a teaching and learning position at
I
London
was at University of
Arts.
London. That was my Dean of
and
Learning teaching role.
Yes. And so how did you approach coming into a role that you were a bit familiar with, but was being created for the first time in this new institution that you were joining?
Yeah. Actually, I walked into that job and they'd had a timetabling failure. So the first, what happened was I walked straight into something that I had to solve. So I don't think I had time to think about it. We had no timetables. They'd actually put students on buses to go on field trips because what they've been doing was changing from one system to another, and the switchover had failed, and basically the timetables have been eradicated. And I was seen as a clean pair of hands. So I was gifted. This was another example of something that turned out to be an asset on my CV, but didn't necessarily feel like a gift at the time. But I was allowed to take on this project. And it was really challenging to me because my dad was an FE lecturer who ran timetabling in his FE college in Swansea. And he'd actually taken early retirement after having a heart attack, as I thought, brought on by timetabling. So I was like, oh my God, I've got this new job and it's a death sentence. But in my previous job, I'd worked with somebody who was a really effective problem solver, and he was a contractor, and I'd said, "Can you come and help me work on this?" And between us, we tackled it by I brought in all the people who were particularly critical of the way that we looked at timetabling. So I started to draw out what the issues were. I had two groups, a steering group and an operational group, but I brought in the people who I didn't want outside the tent pissing in. I brought them in. You're going to have to work on that, aren't you?
I don't know.
I brought them inside the tent, and we started to solve the problem. And actually, it was a bit like my example from Southbank. So once we started to solve it resolved quite quickly, and we went from being extremely challenged in timetabling to being a sector leader within a year. So I think it was because, it was all hands on deck. We really focused on it, and we were being wheeled out to conferences a year later because we'd gone from kind of zero to actually really high functioning timetables. I almost didn't have time to think about it being a new job in answer to your question, because the presenting problem was so imperative that I just had to dive in and get on with it. But it also did have elements I've done before. So we had, I think I restructured the careers team quite early on because I'd led on careers at University of the Arts London, and I knew some of the things that would make it work and some of the things that were impediments, and I could see that quite early. So I did a reorganisation of that as one of the first things I did going in. So there was some stuff was new but imperative, and some things that were a continuation of what I'd done before.
Yeah, so really building. Does having those kinds of successes build and develop your sense of yourself as a leader, moving through into those more senior positions?
Yeah, absolutely. So confidence is a big concept for leaders. We like confident leaders. We respond well to confident leaders. But I'm particularly aware that as a female leader, confidence is something we sometimes have an uneasy relationship with. And we don't always display the confidence that maybe helps people to understand our effectiveness. So I think, again, back to my earlier comment about one of the things I really want to do is make visible the steps to get to senior leadership, because I think there's lots of people with ability who don't necessarily have the confidence in their abilities. But I really believe that we build up confidence by doing things and seeing that we've done things. So rather than empty confidence, I must be able to do it because I'm fantastic. With that sort of narcissistic confidence, I think confidence which is really built on stable, I faced this problem, I addressed it in this way, I learned from it, I can take that into the next time I meet a challenge like that. I think that's really important.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it also goes back to my analogy with education. It goes back to growth mindset. So Carol Dweck's work on do you come to it thinking I can solve it because I'm clever, or I can solve it because I'm actually really good at applying myself to problems and persisting. So having that sense that I am a person who can focus on a problem and work with other people and draw in the resources I need, and then the problem will be resolved, is a really sound basis for confidence, because it's something that you can always develop and you can always build on.
Would you say that confidence is the hardest skill to develop when it comes to leadership?
Uh, no, I wouldn't actually. I actually think the most difficult thing is managing your own emotions.
Oh,
So it's emotional awareness and being able to recognize emotions and not suppress them, but not necessarily act on them. So it's I know I've found this challenge, but I actually think when I see leaders succeed or fail, that's the core thing that they're doing right. They are paying attention to their emotional reaction to something, because often it's telling you that there are values at stakes, or your values have been violated, or or your values are being affirmed. So I think you get an emotional reaction at a very fundamental level to moral challenges, or things that confirm your moral universe. But it's really important that you manage the way you respond to that. So you could use it as an energy to drive action and drive decisions, or you could say that this is not for now, this is not a priority, I have to put it to one side. And I think when you can do that, when you can really master the way you're responding to a situation, lots of things become open to you that are not possible before that. And I would say that's the single thing that you need to learn as a leader, because
that is
people are
so
always
interesting.
watching you, they're always taking messages from you, and really being able to navigate what messages do I want to give out here so that people can act in the way that I need them to act. It's a really difficult thing. And I think leaders often have really powerful emotions, but you have to really manage how you display them.
That is such an interesting answer. Thank you so much for sharing that. Speaking of things that maybe provoke emotions in university leaders, the sector is going through a bit of a tough time at the moment. So I wanted to ask you, what do you see as being the big challenges of the sector, maybe at the moment, but also in the longer term?
Yeah. Well, it is a tough time. What I think we need to do is keep an eye on that absolute mission that we are here to educate, and we are here to create knowledge that will serve our communities and society. So I focus, because the need and the demand is there. It won't go away. It can't be suppressed by government discourse. It will remain. So we need to be always very alert to it and responding to it. But I think another challenge is we have to operate within our income envelopes. So we have to review the way we operate to make sure that we are financially viable. And that is incredibly challenging at the moment. It doesn't feel fair that, income streams have been cut off suddenly. And, we think shooting ourselves economically in the foot, as a nation as well. But it is the reality, and we are not the only sector facing huge financial challenges. So I think we need to apply our creativity and focus to operating within the budget envelopes available to us, really managing our operating costs. Also, of course, looking for income streams that are aligned with our mission. I think it's one of the things I think we really need to do is focus on that mission and not allow ourselves to get distracted by the prospect of income streams that are outside our mission.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah,
I think the demand for education is there, the demand for knowledge creation is there. People, the industries around us and professions around us need answers to really complex questions. How do you deal with AI? How do you support well-being in your workforce? How do you attract and retain talent? How do you make your organization sustainable? All the professions that we interact with and our graduates go and work in will be changing as a result of those global challenges. And universities generate the knowledge in order to answer those questions for professions too. So we really need to work on making sure that cycle of we produce graduates, they go into professions and they change them and they work to a future which doesn't exist yet, but it will be shaped by the knowledge we create in universities. So I think anchoring to our mission, but also being very realistic about funding streams is how we will get through this.
On a slightly different tact, but related to this question of making education accessible, the need for accessible, I wanted to ask you a bit about your work with the Unite Foundation. Can you tell us a bit about what it is and what you do with them?
Yeah, so I'm the chair of a charity which provides homes at universities for students who are care experienced or estranged. And I was very fortunate. This was the right place and the right time, but it was also driven by my earlier answer to one of your questions about being deliberate. So I felt I needed to understand more about governance from the board side as well as from the executive side, and I was looking to be more externally facing. So I was seeking a board position, and this one became available. So I stepped onto the board of this charity, and it has been an enormous gift to me. I have learned about the needs of groups of students I wasn't particularly aware of, students who don't have family homes to return to in the holidays and the consequences for them in the pressures on them financially and their own safety, for example, not necessarily having secure homes outside term time, and the pressures on them to work, and therefore that they're not taking full part in university life. So what happens when you provide a home for a student for 3 years that's secure is that estranged students and care experienced students have the same outcomes in terms of completion, academic success and graduate outcomes as the wider population. So it's absolutely transformative. So it's a fantastic thing to get up and know you're going to do something that really unequivocally changes lives for the better. We've got a corporate sponsor, Unite Students, who make this commitment. So it's a very fortunate in terms of being a charity that has that close relationship with a corporate sponsor. And it's something that I feel I've learned a lot from the experience of being able to be a chair. And I think it helps me as a VC working with the board to have been on both sides of the table on that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. My final question for you is a bit about you as a runner. This is something that definitely requires consistency, resilience, persistence. There is obviously parallels here with any kind of career, but specifically an academic career. And I wanted to know, in terms of persistence, what kind of keeps you in the game? Like, what keeps you in higher education and what keeps you pushing towards the next goal?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. So I do run, and before that I rode. So I'm a real advocate for sport at university because there's no way that I would have taken up rowing if I hadn't had the opportunity at university. And I believe that I use what I've developed through sports every day. So I'm just rereading Will It Make the Boat Go Faster, actually, which is a mixture of a review of Olympic success combined with how you set goals and pursue goals. And it's just reminding me how exactly what you've just said, Eliza, focus, persistence and a goal are really key attributes to success in sport, but I think also professionally as well. And I think the other thing I'd say is that I get a lot of joy out of running and rowing. And I think joy, if I didn't get joy out of doing them, I would find it very hard to generate the energy for the focus and the persistence. So I think you need to enjoy what you do too. And I think there has to be a net positive balance. So you expend energy to do it, but it gives you energy in return. So I think that would be something that I taken from sporting activities that I think is also true at work. You have to find the moments of joy, and that fuels you for continuing to persist. But I know I respond very well to goals. So sport is, when I was rowing at university, one of my crewmates said, the nice thing about rowing is, if you're winning or not. So, in life, it's not always so clear. But once you're in a boat, if you're the fast boat. And I think having that And I really like data as well, I have to say. So one of the things I liked about running is having a Garmin watch and being able to have all the data and see if I'm responding to my training. And I think that all translates into work too. I'm somebody who quite likes to see my data and reports, and I quite like to have goals. And I like being able to see that the things you're doing are having an effect. And it's a very one-to-one relationship in sport and much more complex in a university. But there's elements that cross both.
I can definitely see how that works. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Sian. It's been really terrific talking to you.
Thank you, Eliza. It's been a pleasure.
Wow, there is so much useful insight there for anyone with their eye on a leadership role. It's clear that Sian took a very deliberate and strategic approach to gaining the skills and experience she needed. And it's actually really nice to hear this made explicit, because so often leadership or success is presented as having sort of dropped from the sky with a natural inevitability on certain people. A particularly powerful takeaway for me, I have to say, is her point that skills development does not always seem welcome at the time, because it so often comes in the form of these seemingly insoluble challenges. And that's something I feel we all could benefit from remembering when it feels like things are really hitting the fan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she does say that she says that her path is not a blueprint, but really she does provide really clear points along a potential roadmap based on her own experience. I really loved her answer to the confidence question, because I think I had assumed that confidence was going to be the most difficult or potentially important aspect of leadership. So when she talked about the need for emotional control, I really found that interesting. It was really a different way of thinking about being a leader.
Yeah, and it's very instructive, again, for anyone considering these kind of roles, because that is something that, anyone can take active steps to develop, to focus on, and to manage their emotions that bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, that is it for this episode of the Campus Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, please like and subscribe. And if you're interested in resources on all aspects of global higher education, including leadership and strategy, please visit campus at timeshighereducation.com/campus. We'll see you next time.
You're listening to a Times Higher Education podcast.